1. So, a few years ago, my boyfriend's dad's family decided to get together and all chip in to rent a condo in Ontario. There was a big extended family over there that his dad never saw because he really only got along with one of his 3 sisters. My boyfriend's mom had talked him into going, though, and they let me tag along because I'd been around long enough that they liked me and trusted me. I can't remember where everyone else had gone. I think it was to the beach for what was probably like the 3rd time that day. It was just me and my boyfriend at the condo, because we were kind of sick of the beach and just wanted to do nothing in the shade for a while. We were just sitting outside, looking over the water, and just kind of talking about life. I had just finished reading the Harry Potter series, so we were just kind of talking about that for a bit, when this woman comes out of the brush beside the condo. Just for an idea, this condo was about an acre of land maybe, and it was kind of out in the middle of nowhere. The front of the condo was probably 70 feet from a dirt road no one traveled down really, and there were some dense trees and brush and whatnot that surrounded 3 sides of it. This woman comes out of the wooded area, and I immediately knew something wasn't right. She was limping, and she only had on 1 sandal. And frankly, she looked like shit. She was pale, and her face was gaunt. She was really, really pretty, but she just looked exhausted. The thing that immediately caught my attention was her baby, who she was holding pretty tightly in her arms as she started to come towards us. I didn't really know what to do, but my boyfriend immediately got up and walked over to make sure she was okay. I couldn't help but think of all these awful things might happen. After spending so many hours hearing horror stories on Reddit, I was just terrified she'd do something. My boy is a lot more trusting than I am, though, and he's always had the first instinct of, what's the problem and how can I help? He's never assumed the bad in anybody. So this woman is sobbing by the time she gets on the porch of the condo, and she looks like she's just been through a war zone. She's shaking and hyperventilating and crying, and she's telling us that basically her boyfriend has been drunk for a while, and he's been getting worse and worse, and he's been an overall abusive guy. He'd get pissed whenever she was focusing on the baby instead of him, and part of what annoyed him was that it wasn't his kid, so he kind of didn't care about the baby at all. She told us how this time in particular he was drunk and she was driving him home with the baby in the back seat, and he grabbed the baby's booster seat and tore it out of the car and threw it out the window while they were driving. She got the baby out of the seat or something. I don't remember how, because as she's telling us about how he started hitting her before she took the baby and ran, we hear this yelling, and we turn and see this angry dude walking up to the condo, and she starts losing it. Drunk and angry, this guy followed her out of the condo and was starting to come up to us. He was trying to act like he wasn't pissed. He was going, "Oh, you guys found her, thanks so much. Baby, let's go home." Kind of thing, but he was slurring his speech and not doing a good job of hiding it. My boy has always been a pacifist, honestly. He's kind of even a pushover. He's really non-confrontational, and tries to find a way to talk stuff out and come to an agreement before doing anything. But before I could even say anything, he's across the yard and approaching this guy. As much of a pacifist as he is, he's also huge. He's built like a football player. He's 6'3", and at the time, he was 230 pounds. I've known my boy since we were 10. At the time, we were 20, and we've been dating for just over a year. I knew him better than anyone. He's never done anything like this before, but he goes up to this guy and goes, "Not another step, dude." And he's shaking as he says it. The guy tries to walk around my boy and goes, "It's okay, I'm gonna take her home." And my boy steps in front of him and shakes his head. "You're drunk," he said, "so I'm gonna pretend like maybe you didn't get what I just said. Don't come any closer." It's at this point the guy stops trying to pretend, and he says something like, "You don't know what's going on. That's my girlfriend, and I'm gonna take her home." And he tries rounding my boyfriend again, and one more time my boyfriend blocks him and goes, "Stop!" I've never heard this tone in his voice before or since. It was scary. It wasn't him. The guy tried one more time before my boy finally put his hand on his chest and pushed him back a bit. Keeping his hand on the guy's chest, he says, "I'm telling you right now, you're not going anywhere near that girl and her child, so turn the fuck around and walk away." This guy is about 5'6", maybe 5'7", So when he looked up to threaten my boyfriend, he looked like a child. The guy finally looks at my boyfriend, and he says something that I couldn't hear. My boyfriend said something back, and then the guy stared at him for a moment, like he was deciding whether or not to do anything. My boyfriend finally pushed him away, and the guy stumbled back, and then started pointing at me and the girl as he was saying something, and then started to walk away. I didn't learn till the next day, but the guy had told my boyfriend he had a gun, and that he was coming back, and that he'd kill him if we stopped him again. My boyfriend's response to this changes depending on who's telling the story. Originally he told me he'd feed the guy his own teeth, which made me laugh, because he's such a dork and he got that from a movie. And ever since that line he tells everyone else it's "I'll be waiting." The woman was sobbing, the baby was sobbing, and I was shaking because even though he didn't throw any punches or anything, I could tell he was ready to hurt this guy if anything else had happened. We called the police, and didn't really do much of anything outside of make sure everyone was breathing and take the girl to her sister's place. We didn't really hear much after from her. But I know my boyfriend sent her an email once or twice, and she's married now to someone else and had another kid last time they talked. It was a really nice trip despite that part, and a fight my boy's dad got into with someone in the family. I had P-meal for the first time. 2. Back in 2006, when I was 17, I met this girl named Cindy through mutual friends. We became really good friends, and hung out often over the next few years. As the years went by, she started hanging out with the wrong crowd and started acting gangster. By 2009, I had my own car, and the only time Cindy would call me to hang out is if I did her a favor first, which was a ride somewhere. Eventually, I got tired of this, and any time I would call her, she usually wouldn't answer. So I got fed up and stopped being friends with her. In 2011, after a while of not seeing each other, I forget who contacted who, but we got together to hang out. As usual, she needed a favor first. A ride over to the next city to visit a friend. Forgetting all the times this happened in the past, I said yes, and this led to one of the most terrifying moments of my life. After picking her up at her house, she tells me last moment that a female friend is coming with us too. Me being an idiot, I pick her up, and I'm happy that I'm hanging out with these two girls. We get on the highway, and despite asking numerous times where we are going and what we are doing, she wouldn't give me a straight answer. But I drive on as I'm happy to be hanging out with the girls. A while later, we reach our destination, and it's a correctional facility. She came to visit a male friend who goes by the name Suspect. After sitting alone in the lobby and questioning my life choices, they come back and we leave. It was a pretty quiet drive home, and they didn't ask me what's wrong, as they happily chatted and left me out of the conversation. I dropped them both off and went home. A few days later, Cindy calls me and asks to hang out again, telling me that it will be just her this time. I say yes, and we set up a time for the following day. The following day, something important came up, and I called Cindy to let her know that I would not be able to see her at the specified time. She did not like this, got angry, and hung up. A few hours later, when I was home, she texts me and tells me not to blame her if guys come looking for me. A short while later, I get a collect call from the correctional facility, and being stupid, I answer it. A gangster-sounding guy addresses me by name, calls me a few insults, and then tells me I'm about to get lit up. Cindy then texts me saying that there are guys in my neighborhood looking for me. This is terrifying because I was out front of my house working on my car. I try to call her and she doesn't answer. She texts again and tells me they are close by now. I immediately try to call her again and she doesn't answer. She then texts me and says that the only way she can stop them is to pick her up and drive her to the correctional facility. Being terrified and fearing for my life, I oblige. This time she brings another female friend, Melanie, who I know, and we head over to the correctional facility as they blare their music in my car and act like nothing happened. After they visit the inmate, they proceed to drink in my car despite me telling them not to. They blare more of their music on the drive back, eventually spill an entire bag of chips in my car and crush it into the carpet. I tell them to clean it up as they are getting out of my car at Cindy's house. They just walk away without a word. I dump all the garbage and chips out of my car onto the street in front of her house, and find my iPod on the floor, oily and mixed in with everything. Feeling completely disrespected and terrified, I blocked Cindy's and her friend's number, so they never contact me again. Later on, through mutual friends, I learned that Cindy and Melanie gave suspect my name and address and set the whole thing up. Cindy, Melanie, and your goons, let's never meet again. 3. I met him in high school because we rode the same school bus. I was a freshman who was new to the area and he was a sophomore. He would get off the bus 3 stops before me. After a month, he started sitting in the seat behind my usual spot on the bus, and then would get off at the same stop as me. The first time it happened, I did think it was weird, but figured maybe he had a friend in the area. I never made contact with him and just walked home. It happened several times after, and I had an eerie feeling he might be following me, and that's why he sat behind me on the bus so I wouldn't suspect him. But I soothed my worries again with the thought he might have a friend that lives down here, and maybe he didn't want to walk as far, so he got off at my stop. I did turn back once to see where he went after he got off the bus, but never saw him. It was like he disappeared. He started showing direct interest in me in the hallways. Somehow, without us being in any classes together, he learned my name. He would say hi to me by name in the hallways as I'd pass, and he would always wave. I never stopped walking to have a chat with him, and I found the interaction rather odd, because he always did this when he saw me. Even if he already said hi to me that day, it was always the same words, "Hello, OP," then wave. I typically waved back to be polite during these brief encounters, but after a few weeks of that happening, it seemed really weird. I asked my brother about him, as they were in the same grade, and he told me his real name, but said he goes by the name Goggles, because he wore these thick Coke bottle glasses. He also confirmed my thought that Goggles had some strange fascination with me. I figured he had a crush on me, but I wasn't attracted to him at all. I really wanted nothing to do with him, but did maintain my politeness of waving hi to him in the mornings. Then something really creepy happened. One day he showed up to my house on a weekend, unexpectedly. He rang the bell and my mom let him in when he asked for me. She yelled for me that I had a friend stop by, and when I saw him at the bottom of the staircase in the entryway of my house, I freaked out inside. I greeted him and asked him what he was doing here. He said he wanted to hang out, and then proceeded to ask my mom if we could hang out at his house. I was still upstairs and absolutely baffled by how he was actually inside my house, that I didn't have time to think of an excuse on what I was busy doing. My mom, who was extremely excited I had a friend since I was new to the area, quickly gave him permission to hang out with me and ushered me to come downstairs. I ended up leaving with him. I thought if anything, I'd have a chance to clear the air with him and see what his deal was. We started to walk and I asked him how he knew where I lived. He said from riding the bus he saw me coming home one day. He said I always seemed really nice, so he wanted to get to know me. I talked about how I was new to the area and what I thought of the school. I asked him what he planned for us to do at his house. He said he didn't really have a plan, but made sure to tell me his parents weren't home. I expressed how I was confused by why he told my mom we were friends when we barely know each other. He said, "Don't you want to be friends?" I didn't know how to answer that truthfully without sounding rude, so I said yeah instead. We got to his parents' house, and I felt really awkward but went inside. The place was barren, almost like no one even lived there. No couch, no TV. I asked for a second time what he wanted to do. He didn't come up with an answer again, besides hang out. The truth finally poured out, and I told him I felt unsure about this whole thing, and said I didn't understand why he wanted to hang out at his house if there wasn't a plan. I told him I don't want to hang out that day and that I'd better go home. I let myself out in a hurry and basically ran home. I never said anything to my mom about that day. I really don't know what his true intentions were. So as the months go by, I don't even make eye contact with him on the bus. I do, however, make sure he gets off at his bus stop and isn't following me home. He even stopped saying hi and waving to me in the hallways for a while. The school year ends. My sophomore year starts, and he's saying hi and waving to me again in the hallways every time we pass each other by. Sometimes I wave back, and sometimes I pretend to not notice. I feel very annoyed when he does this multiple times in the day, so I go out of my way to find a new route to my next class so he won't see me. My brother gets his license, so we never have to take the bus again. My junior year, Goggles is still waving and saying hi with each sight of me. I am very fed up at this point and always ignore him and never wave back or say hi. I did see him once in a computer lab prior to my graphic design class starting. I sat down at my assigned computer and he said he found my MySpace, and he confessed he was looking at my pictures all night long. I get red in the face and don't know what to say. He tells me we should hang out again and that it was fun the last time we did. A few of my peers from my class overhear this and make comments on what he was doing with my pictures that night. Ew. I avoid him like the plague the remainder of the year. He graduated after my junior year was completed, thankfully. I move about 20 minutes away at the start of senior year and started working at the local movie theater. And that's where he finds me next. He comes in with his mom, and I'm at the concession stand and I have to wait on them. They make weekly trips to the theater and always get in my line for concessions. We make no small talk during these interactions, but I don't understand. Why do they always choose my line? He starts to frequent the movies alone and tries to talk to me at the concession stand on slow nights. For a while, he was there twice a week. I started telling my coworkers there he's my stalker. Someone tells me they heard a coworker of ours give him detailed information on my typical work schedule. I'm pissed off and stop being friends with that coworker. She then gives him my cell number out of spite. Meanwhile, every time I see him come to the concession stand, I try to hide in the back room to avoid him. I start to get calls every night from the same number. The caller wouldn't typically leave messages or anything. However, there was one really creepy message of some heavy breathing that was left. I asked my dad to help me block the number. We went to the cell provider and they said I can't block one number. I can either block all numbers or none at all, so I don't do anything. Dad doesn't want to change my cell number, so I graduate. I haven't had any interaction with Goggles since I started to hide from him at my job, and the random calls became less frequent, until I went to Wendy's with my friend and wearing a miniskirt and tank top. We get behind the first customer in line who is paying all in change, and I realize it's him. I freak out inside and whisper to my friend that it is my stalker. I hope he doesn't notice me. Of course he notices me as soon as he turns around. He checks me out and asks, "Hey, did you go to our high school?" My friend stupidly says, "Yeah, we did." He then asks for me by name and my friend says, "Yeah, that's her." I wanted to smack my friend for saying this to him. He says to me that I look really good and asks if he could sit with us when we get our food. I quickly tell him no. He then goes to find a seat and we order. I want to leave ASAP at this point. My friend wants to eat there and she won't leave with me. So we sit down and Goggles changes chairs to sit at the table right next to ours. I ate quickly and in silence and it was so awkward. He kept asking where I was living now as he saw I no longer lived at my old house. I didn't tell him shit and said he didn't need to know. I see him the next time at the local grocery store. He's retrieving carts from the lot. I had no idea he worked there, but when I saw him I ran inside as quickly as I could hoping he wouldn't see me. And you know what? He saw me. He stopped retrieving carts to follow me from the parking lot into the store, referred to me as Miss and asked me in 2 different aisles if he could help me find anything. I told him no both times. When I was ready to check out, he opened up his own cashier lane, and another worker ushered me over to him. I said to him he didn't need to follow me around the store or open up a lane for me, but he said he wanted to help me and that we should hang out sometime. I told him he needs to leave me alone. I'm attending community college and guess who is also there? Goggles! I noticed him following me on my routes to class, and he starts waiting outside the art classroom I'm in for me to leave to follow me again. One day I'm waiting on getting a coffee from the vending machine, and he runs up to me and greets me like I'm his long-lost friend. He gives me a tight, long hug in the hallway. I'm mortified and I'm standing there with my arms flat at my side, not hugging back. He finishes the hug and I say, "Was that necessary? Don't ever fucking touch me again." I ended up dropping that class to avoid him and file a police report. That was the last time I saw him. I've since moved multiple times, and I think he finally got the hint. I don't even know why he chased me or even followed me for so long. Maybe I was too nice. But Goggles, don't you ever fucking touch me again, and let's never meet again. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories. episode 477. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use and sent in stories for use in this video. If you have a story yourself you'd like to send in, then please do send it along to kingofthecities@gmail.com. That link and all sorts of other fun things like merchandise, Twitter and so on, they can all be found in the description. Unfortunately, I had to start recording a little later than I wanted tonight, because for some reason my neighbours decided to start drilling at about 8:30 p.m. Don't know what they were doing, but thankfully it didn't last too long. I actually banged on the walls, it seemed to shut them up for a minute. Okay, happy hell freezer. Happy, cheery hell freezer. Okay, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.